Hi, welcome to Property Law 101. I'm Sara Bronin, and I created this series to help you think about four fundamental questions in property and property law. Today, we are talking about the third question, using property. So as a property owner, you have the right to exclude other people from your property. Today, we're talking about the extent of that right to exclude in light of a case that's discussed in virtually every property class. It is called Jacque versus Steenberg Homes from the Wisconsin Supreme Court not too long ago in the canon of property law, 1997. The central question in this case involves the doctrine of trespass. So let's review the definition that I like to use for trespass, and that is an unprivileged intentional intrusion on property possessed by another. We covered the elements of this definition in another video. Before we get to the facts of this case, we should talk about its setting. So the case takes place in a rural area, 170 acres of land. The land is owned by a family called the Jacques. You would think that with this much land, they wouldn't notice if someone has trespassed over their property. But you would be wrong in this particular case. And it's important for you to know some background information about this family. They had lost some of their land in an adverse possession claim 10 years before this case. So if you're thinking about a family who is very teed up to monitor their property, this is that family. It explains too why we're in court, even though there are no actual physical damages. So now getting to the facts beyond the premises, they're pretty straightforward. A neighbor of the Jacques had purchased a mobile home. Steenberg Homes agreed to deliver it. Very simple. Steenberg Homes asked the Jacques on a couple of occasions whether they could move the mobile home over the Jacques property. And on those occasions, the Jacques said no. They even got out official maps and pointed out to Steenberg Homes which property is theirs. So why did Steenberg Homes want to cross the property in the first place? It was the easiest and shortest way to place the mobile home in its new location. The other route was a winding road covered in, according to the facts of the case, 7 feet of snow. So you have this objection. Even knowing about the Jacques objection, Steenberg Homes pulled the mobile home over the Jacques property. So this is a classic instance of a trespass. It is unprivileged, it is intentional, it is intrusion, it is on property possessed by someone else. So the question that this court is focusing on at this stage is not about whether there is a trespass. It is what the Jacques get for the intrusion. Based on the facts, there was no damage, actual physical damage. And the jury below awarded the Jacques just $1 in nominal damages. But this court confirms a $100,000 punitive award. And you might be asking yourself, why? The reason is because even though actual property damage was minimal, the rights to ownership and the infringement on ownership rights were great. The Wisconsin Supreme Court in this case is giving property owners tools to exclude others from their property. The punitive damage award is a deterrent to future trespassers, especially, as you see in this case, intentional trespassing across stated objections. So I do want to point out one more thing about this somewhat unusual case. The court mentions the concept of self-help. This means people taking things into their own hands. The court says that it needs to deter bad behavior so people don't engage in self-help like they used to in the era of dueling. That was my attempt at a sword, by the way. Because this trespass is so intentional, there's a chance that without the protection of the law, future families like the Jacques would do something dramatic to defend their property. So this is what the court had in mind when it mentioned the concept of self-help. So So I'm going to leave that judicial analysis there. I encourage you to engage with me on Twitter or through my website, and I will hope to see you next time. Thanks.